Hello and welcome to UC Today. My name's David Dungay. Today I am joined by William Rubio from CallTower and Irwin Lazar from Metrigy. Well, welcome to the show, guys. How are you both?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about cloud voice, in particular some of the big challenges around cloud voice as well, especially when it comes to things like porting. It's been a perpetual hot topic, porting. But before we get into that subject, should we do a few introductions? William, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. David, thank you very much for having me on. And it's a pleasure to be working and having this conversation with Erwin this morning. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Call Tower. Been there for a little bit over 11 years. And since 2002, Call Tower has really grown into a leading cloud communications, unified communications, contact center, collaboration solutions provider, really on a global scale. We stand out really by offering integrated and supporting top tier solutions such as Operator Connect for Microsoft Teams, direct routing on Teams, also in the government sector in the United States with GCC High, Cisco WebEx calling, Cisco UCM, Zoom phones, Zoom BYOB, and a host of contact center solutions, including Five9 that's over in the Gartner Quadrant. So we're pretty excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
And Owen.
Yeah, hi, I'm Irwin Lazar, President and Principal Analyst with Metrigy. I lead our research coverage around the unified communications and collaboration space. I've been an analyst now for a little over 20 years. Prior to that, my background was in network engineering. And we spend our time going out and gathering data from end user organizations about what they're doing and why, and what justifies their spend, how they measure success. And we produce research that looks at both the adoption of different technologies over time, but also what value are companies gaining from their investments in emerging communication and collaboration technologies.
So, well, let's dive straight into these questions then. Let's start with the challenges around number porting. So many companies have struggled with this over the years. But where do we stand today? What are the primary challenges faced by cloud communication providers when it comes to number porting today? William, do you want to kick us off with what you're sort of seeing there?
Sure, definitely will. First and foremost, I think it's kind of the elephant in the room when you start talking about porting. It is there's nothing sexy or attractive about it when you're trying to onboard a customer. It's a necessary evil, and you only usually kind of hear about it when things go wrong, right? It's usually the way that the communication really starts back and forth. I think the interesting thing when you start to look at where it's evolved today, going back into, let's say, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, it was kind of a little bit of the wild, wild west. And then spamming and robocalling and so forth just continued to increase and increase. And a lot of organizations, a lot of government organizations have really started to put some pretty large restrictions around their numbers overall, as far as porting within a country, or even acquiring new numbers within a country, just because of the fact that they're really trying to avoid that. I think the other part of it too, which sometimes is not really understood or known that much, is that a lot of these companies or a lot of these government agencies, they tend to run the telecom regulations, and in some cases are tied into the carriers because they're owned by the government. And even the ones that are not, they're really trying to keep those organizations going. So you can imagine that an organization, let's say that's a North American or US organization, is going into a different country, and all of a sudden you're starting to pull out numbers. Well, guess what? You're also pulling away revenue from those organizations. So they really try to do everything that they can to keep the locals number, or to keep the numbers local, and also try to make sure that they keep those agencies or those carriers competitive within those countries. So there's a lot of challenges when you look at it, not even area by area, but really country by country, and sometimes even city by city, as far as who you're working with and what are the different regulatory requirements based on those countries when you're working with an organization that's an enterprise that's in multiple different countries.
I think we should definitely explore that a little bit further in a moment. But I mean, Erwin, when it comes to challenges, do you broadly agree? What are you seeing? What are your sort of customers and people you're talking to thinking about?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we see when we're talking to the buyer side is the results of everything that William just mentioned, which is leading to delay, leading to confusion, leading to challenges. So as organizations think about perhaps migrating from an on-prem environment into the cloud, and they want to migrate phone numbers or port them to the cloud provider at the time, they run into issues with, can they port mobile numbers to fixed numbers and vice versa? How do they handle SMS campaigns? That's become a big issue where now any business SMS number, in order just to even text other people, not necessarily as part of a marketing campaign, but it has to be registered as a marketing campaign. But ultimately, a lot of the issues that we see are on the delay side, where the carriers are non-responsive. You're dealing with a lot of different government agencies. And from an enterprise buyer perspective, they don't have the resources to deal with this. They're going to look to provider partners who can manage that complexity for them and help them navigate through the myriad of different operating environments. As Bill mentioned, in some cases you have scenarios where governments are part owners of the carriers as well, which again adds further complexity.
I mean, let's try and unpack some of that complexity then. When it comes to regional differences or international regions, how are the regulatory differences, between these regions and different countries, really impacting this number porting process when it comes to cloud comms? And I guess as a second part, we need to talk about how do we manage those intricacies as well. But William, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the end user experience, right, you're trying to make it as smooth as possible. And these regulatory agencies are changing so rapidly. I mean, in some cases, even week to week. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, we get tons and tons of notices via email, via regular mail, as far as some of the changes and requirements. Some of the things that we've seen out there from a challenging standpoint is, and Irwin kind of hit this on the head, you have somebody that already has existing service, and then all of a sudden they're going to move to the cloud or move from one cloud provider over to, let's say, the CallTower. And now we need a business certificate. We need a business established address within the country. And sometimes we're even being asked to provide a passport of an employee that's actually a citizen of that country that's actually working for the organization. And you start putting all these different requirements in front of a customer, and a customer starts to say, well, why am I doing this now? I didn't need to do this in the past. I'm just asking for either porting or I'm looking for even new numbers. And it's really just because those government agencies are really making the changes. The other part of that too is that from an organization like CallTower, which we obviously are working in 70 plus different countries, which makes it a challenge, and is the fact that once you start porting in those countries, you're identified by the regulatory agency. So that means that we have to file our taxes. We got to make sure that we're remitting taxes on behalf of the customers that are actually providing or working in those specific areas and countries. So there's two parts of that, really, right? There's the compliance that we have to do as a carrier, and then there's the compliance from the customer standpoint that they have to do. And we've actually seen a shift of organizations, or let's call it competitors in our space, that have moved away from this. They've kind of thrown up their hands and said, this is not something we're going to do. It gets really challenging out there. We've taken a different approach, that this is really in our DNA, good, bad, or indifferent. And we're trying to make sure to make it as smooth and as easy for our customers as they do transition to us, and set up the right expectations, right? I think nowadays everything with know your customer, right? Your end user customer is really a big thing overall. So we try to provide as much education to the customer prior to the porting, so they know what the expectations are, and we set it right at the beginning.
Yeah. And I think that's really a key, what you just mentioned, that customer education. And, getting ready for this call, I was going and looking through some of the different regulations and some of the different surveys that have been published about response times. And that's really the critical issue is, the customer expectation may be, well, I can port in the US in a matter of minutes, but in certain countries, it may take weeks. And if they're not aware of that, they're going to be frustrated, right?
Yeah. I mean, the big question here is, how can businesses really manage these intricacies? And is the only way to do this across multiple regions? I should probably come to Irwin on this for this question. Is the only way to manage this through a partner like CallTower or elsewhere, or can customers approach this in another sort of way?
Yeah, I think if you're a company that has global reach and you're looking at having a local number presence and local connectivity in different parts of the world, you're going to have to go through a partner. It's, I think it's beyond the scope of most, if not all, organizations to have to deal with those regulatory intricacies that William just went through, and certificate of operations in different countries, tax laws, and having that relationship with the providers and being a trusted partner within within different countries to where you can enable number porting without triggering alarms that those numbers are being hijacked or something along those lines. So yeah, I think to answer your question, a partner is essential.
Well, bearing in mind we've got William in the room, how do you ensure, William, your customers are never going to need to think about porting again? I'm sure no one wants to think about porting if they don't have to, but how are you making that sort of a reality?
Yeah, we kind of went ahead and tried to trademark that. I think we did that through a marketing team, but we basically try to call it the last port you'll ever have to do, right? And just the way, and this kind of goes to the platforms that we're running on our end. When you start to look at the evolution of the way that cloud communications has really changed the landscape over the last few years with the emergence of Microsoft Teams, both on direct routing and also on Operator Connect. I think the emergence of Zoom Phone, right? I think they launched in January of 2020, and here we are 4 years later, and they have close to about 10 million users themselves on Zoom Phone. And then even Cisco with Cisco WebEx, a lot of migrations of customers coming over from Call Manager and the prem-based type of Cisco solutions moving into the cloud. Those three have really become the leaders in the space. I mean, I think Microsoft's last numbers between all of the partners like CallTower and themselves was somewhere around 18 or 19 million voice-enabled users on Microsoft Teams. Cisco is somewhere around 13 million. I had mentioned Zoom. I think it's about 9 or 9.5, their last earnings call. When you look at that compared to the other folks in the space that probably 5 or 6 years ago were the leaders, they're not even really a close second or third. I think they're a little bit further out. So I think when you start to look at the last port, as we kind of call it, for us, it's once you port over to CallTower and you're looking at these three different cloud leading platforms, we have the ability to go ahead and basically manage and move you from one to the other. So some users could start with Microsoft Teams, some can move over to Zoom, some can move over to Cisco, and some like to live even in a hybrid environment overall, that they're saying, hey, I need to use a combination of those cloud platforms. I also at the same time have a premise-based solution, and I'm not ready to do a full rip and replace to my organization right now. So I kind of need to live in that hybrid stage for a year, whether it's because of contractual issues in a specific area, or whether it just be because they don't have the resources behind the scenes to go ahead and really do everything in 60 or 90 or 120 days. Once you port over to us, we could actually even deliver that SIP trunk into that prem-based solution. And then you could redirect those DIDs and enable those users in the cloud with CallTower. But at the same time, the ones that are still on the prem-based side, they could continue to communicate back and forth with the ones in the cloud. And you never touch the PSTN. There's no usage cost on it. It really kind of works as an internal call. And that resonates well with customers, that we're giving them that flexibility to basically decide how they want to go ahead and migrate, whether it be from another cloud provider or into the cloud on a premise base, but really kind of make sure that we're meeting their timelines and their time. So we can do it very quickly, but at the same time, we understand that resources and limitations and contracts kind of get in the way. So we'll help them walk as quickly and as slowly as they need
to. I wanted to talk about the bring your own carrier trend, right? And Irwin, you might be able to shed a bit of light on this. I'm seeing this more and more in the market. Why are people choosing to go down that route? And why is that becoming a preferred route for a lot of these customers?
Yeah, there's a number of different reasons. So in our research, if you look specifically at Microsoft, who's been I'd say the leader in customers using the BYOC approach, north of 70% of companies that are rolling out Microsoft Teams Phone are doing so through BYOC. The biggest reason is it saves them money. So if you compare that versus the PSTN access services or plans that are available through Microsoft, and again, competing carriers for larger enterprises is often the same case, is that they can go out and get their own plans at a lower cost. They also need that reach into countries, remote parts of the world that might not be served through the default offerings provided by the carrier. And I think to William's point earlier, having that flexibility to be able to support a hybrid environment. So, most companies, especially large enterprise, are not monolithic. In our research, 30% are still operating some on-prem calling platforms. Roughly 30 to 40% are probably operating contact center platforms. And so the complexity of trying to manage and port numbers between different carriers, potentially being locked into carriers that you're not 100% sure you trust yet as you migrate into the cloud, becomes a barrier to adoption. But if I can take that that dial plan complexity, that PSTN access complexity, and kind of abstract that out to a layer that sits above all of my underlying communication services, then that gives me the flexibility to migrate at my own pace, to say, you know what, I've started to use this cloud provider and I'm not real happy with them. I want to move to a different cloud provider, but I can do that without having to go and report all of my numbers. It gives me, again, as a IT owner, a communications owner, additional flexibility. So, and then the last part is that it also sets the stage to add in additional services into that PSTN connectivity layer. So I can add in things like call recording and analytics and spam prevention and telephony denial of service prevention and so on, because I've integrated all of the PSTN access services that are coming into my underlying applications.
Yeah, you mentioned migration there, Irwin. Obviously, so important to get that migration journey right when switching between services. But William, maybe you can explain a little bit more about the crawl, walk, run migration implementation process that CallTower are running, and how that's really, I guess, supercharging that customer experience at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the whole rip and replace, right? Organizations are excited about going to a cloud-based solution that's really going to hopefully service all of their end users across the globe, wherever they might be, right? It's all about that end user experience and making sure that a user in Brazil is going to have the same experience as a user over in the UK. And that's really what they're doing. But for these organizations, the challenges, and just like Irwin mentioned, it's not just about the bring your own carrier and the connectivity. It's about what other feature sets, right? Whether it be call recording or text messaging or CRM integration or contact center, all those different items that are just part of their day-to-day service that they need. And then the other part of it is dealing with going back to the regulations and the migration is what do you have depending on their office that you're in. I mean, we run into customers all the time that are multinational organizations that in some cases we're providing Operator Connect. As an example, in other cases, we're providing direct routing. And then at the same time, we're providing our managed gateway service, which is a country that is not going to allow porting. And you do have to work with a local carrier. Usually it's a government carrier that you're dealing with in that country, just to keep the calls local for them there. And then you use the gateway to get pretty much to the rest of the world. And you run into that more and more every day of that multiple type of design that is needed overall. So for us, it's really about making sure that we understand what the customer's needs are, but making sure that at the end of the day, the end user experience is as close or equal to, regardless of where that user is. And that also goes back to controls with the customer from an IT staff. I was with a customer a couple of months ago that's out of the Netherlands, and the guys that were actually running the telephony aspect of it within Microsoft Teams one was in Germany, one was in the US, and the other one was in Brazil. And they're all supporting all their users on a global level, which are like 15,000 users. So you're going to run into that. And I think you need to make sure you look to a partner that understands that and understands the different regulations and the different migration paths that you want to have across the globe.
Fantastic. So we're coming towards the end of the conversation now, but let's leave our audience with some top tips. And there's a lot of information there to kind of distill down. But let's start with Irwin. What are your top tips for the audience today? For those businesses that are really looking to succeed in these kind of mixed, complex environments. What would you say they need to focus on?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is the criticality of voice. We in the collaboration space spend an awful lot of time these days talking about things like AI and video. But at the end of the day, our research shows that 30 to 40% of consumers will not do business with a company unless they can call them. And calling is still the most widely used customer interaction channel, both for sales as well as customer support. So making sure that voice network is reliable and can meet the needs of the organization in all of the different regions that they operate is critical. So that means that as you're thinking about evolving your communication strategy and the platforms that you might be using to deliver call services, you have to ensure that you understand how you're going to keep those connected to the PSTN, how you're going to do it at minimal cost with the highest possible reliability.
Fantastic. And William, give us your top tips.
Yeah, I think, to kind of piggyback a little bit what Irwin was saying there, I think that's first and foremost, right? The voice quality is definitely key. We've seen actually utilization increase after the pandemic instead of decrease, which there was a big prediction that was going to happen. The other part of it too is when you're looking at moving into these type of environments, whether it's a hybrid or, with prem and cloud and so forth. You also want to make sure that from a security standpoint, it is locked down. I mean, fraud just continues to be an issue across the globe, right? I could always control an end user that is using our platforms when they're calling outbound, right? But where are they calling to, right? Are they calling to a mobile number? Are they calling to a location in the world that sometimes has some challenges with fraud? So I think you got to make sure that you're working with organizations that understand the fraud, the spam calls, and so forth, and that you have that network secured down to make sure, number one, you're providing the right voice quality to your end users and your customers. And then at the same time, from a security standpoint, making sure that fraud is either, number one, kept to a minimum or at least eliminated for the most part, because it could get very pricey and it could really bring down an organization within a matter of minutes.
Gentlemen, I think that's a great place to end today's discussion. I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Irwin.
And thank you for watching. You've been watching me, David Dungay, on UC Today. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please give us a like and a share on social media. That's it from me. See you next time.